Now that we have pressed the inseam on both of these pieces, we're ready to stitch the crotch seam here. So to begin, we want to take one of these pieces and turn it right, have one that's right side out and one that is wrong side out. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take the one that is wrong side out, leave it on the table, take the one that is right side out, and stuff it inside the other. This is how we're going to get our right sides together. Okay? So now we can see right sides are touching each other. I'm going to line all this up a little better before we start pinning. So I want to start pinning this all the way around, but before I begin, we want to triple check that everything is laying out the way it's supposed to. On this side, I have one notch. So on the opposite, I should also have one notch. This is the front of your shorts. On this side, I have a triple notch. Yep, triple notches over here too. This is the back side of your shorts. So I'm going to start first by lining up my inseam lines. So I'll line up the cut edges, the serged edges just to begin. And now I'm going to stab right in the seam. I'm going to lift up the seam allowance a little bit so I can make sure that I am hitting that stitch line right at the seam. We're going to match that over here too, so that our seams are perfectly lined up with each other. It takes a little practice to line up these stitch lines, but you want to make sure that they are nicely lined up. And just like we did on the inseam, we're going to start pinning this whole line by matching up various points, but this time we've got more points to match up. You want to match up your inseams, your beginning and your end. We're going to match up these notches that exist here, the triple notches and the single notches. So I'm going to start on the very end right here at the corner, match this up first, do that over here as well. And now I can match up the notches that exist in the middle. So we got a thread trace line up here on both sides. Get that notch all perfectly lined up. Match up my triple notches. So what I'm gonna do to actually match these is I'm gonna match the center one. The fact that there are 3 notches here, that is an indication that this is the back side of my pajama shorts, which is why I have 3 notches here instead of 1. But you don't necessarily have to put a pin on each of those 3 notches. So you can either do 1 in the middle of those 3 or 2 to line up the opposite sides, but there's no need to do 3 pins right there. That's a little excessive on pinning. I'm gonna match the single notch on this side, which tells me it's the front of my pajama shorts. Okay, so now I've got all of my notches matched up. So now I want to pin this all the way around. So I'm gonna turn this sideways so I can take a look at it. When you're sewing, you want the bulk of your fabric to go off to the left. So if I were to, with the way this is laid out, put this part in my machine, I've got all my fabric on the right side here, and it's gonna be really bulky. So I need to stitch from here, which means my pins need to point this way all the way around the curve. So your pins are they're gonna look like they're changing directions, but they're not. They all need to face the same direction. So this side needs to go this way because this is how I'm gonna hold it into the sewing machine. So I'm gonna start right here and put my pins this direction. Oh, I missed a notch. Line up this notch first. Then I'll start pinning all the way around. Okay, now we're good. And just like on our inseam, we're gonna pin all the way around, right on our stitch line, making sure that the straight pins are coming in and out of our stitch line on both sides. This is the first project that I'm having you do this much stitch line lining up. So take your time with the pinning process. It is long, it is tedious, but if you take your time here and make sure you are very accurate with your pinning, then your stitching is going to be more accurate. Because remember, for theater, we are sewing things for one very specific body, and that is the performer in front of us. And we want it to be accurate to their body, which means you have to sew accurately in order for the garment to fit the way you want to. Go. And we're just gonna pin all the way around. As I'm going around, my pins are all continuing to face the same direction. So in a minute, it's gonna look like my pins have shifted direction when I get over to this side, but that is not actually the case. And I'm starting on one end and just working my way around, because that for me makes it mentally easier to make sure my pins are all going the same direction. If you happen to pin the wrong direction, it's not a big deal, but it does mean you have to flip all of your pins. And if you've taken a long time to pin it in the first place, it can be really frustrating to have to flip your pins the opposite direction. You always want the pointy part of your pin pointing towards the sewing machine, and the ball or the head of the pin pointing towards you, because it's easier to take out. If it's the other way around, it is really annoying to have to remove those pins, and it can cause an inaccuracy in your sewing because you've got pins being pulled out before you need to. Now on the curve here, it may feel a little tricky. Your pin may not look like it's exactly straight on the curve because it's a straight pin going around a curve. Just make sure where your pin enters and exits the fabric that it is on the line on both sides. I promise it'll all come out correctly. And there's like a finger's width of space between my pins. I'm not putting them so close together that the pins are on top of each other. Okay, so now that is pinned all the way around. As you can see, they're pointing this direction, but as I go around the curve, it looks like they've changed direction, but they really haven't. Okay, let's take this to the sewing machine. Okay, just like on all of the other seams, we are going to sew through the seam allowance. We're gonna start here near the edge of the fabric. So through the seam allowance with a back stitch, and then continue around. Have a pin tray of some kind handy so that as you're sewing, you can pull your pins out and put them in a pin tray. We don't want loose pins on the table. That is asking for pins to be knocked off and lodging in someone's shoe. So I'm coming up here on the curve, so I want to put my hand underneath to make sure that nothing accidentally gets bunched up underneath here, and I sew a wrinkle or crease or catch something I don't want to catch. So especially as you're coming around this curve, feel with one of your hands to make sure that the layer of fabrics that you're sewing through feels like the right amount. Another thing I'm doing as I am sewing and I'm pulling my pins out is I'm putting pressure on my fabric to hold it in place while I pull those pins out. So now I don't have a stitch line across this open seam allowance. 2 notes at this moment. Feel underneath, because you've pressed it on both sides, this should not get caught underneath in a weird way, but you do want to feel and make sure that the seam allowances are all flat on both sides. But you're just going to visually follow the curve that is underneath there to connect over. So so that you come out right on your next stitch line. Again, I'm going to shift my fabric so that it's not bunching up in a weird way. The little clunk sound you heard was just the needle brushing the perpendicular pin. It happens. The needle didn't break. We're fine. And back stitch. Sew off the edge. Okay, we're gonna clip our threads. Then we're ready to take this to the ironing machine. Oh, look at that! I won bobbin chicken. That's how much bobbin thread was left on here. Woohoo! Before we start this ironing process, I'm going to show you two things tool-wise that I'm going to use to my advantage to make this job a lot easier. So first of all, I'm going to use the curved pointy end of my ironing board to slip my pajama shorts on top of to make it easier to manipulate the fabric and get to the layer that I want to iron. The other thing I'm going to use is this right here, and I'll make sure we have one in class. This is called the tailor's ham. A lot of times they have actually like a buffalo red check plaid top and then a white bottom. But it's just a curved shape. And we use tools like this when ironing curves so that the pressing actually, the fabric moves with the shape of the body. So we're gonna use this to our advantage as well. But before we do anything to the actual seam as far as pressing it open, the first thing I wanna do is I wanna press this row of stitching to kind of help embed the stitching into the fabric. We could have done that with the inseam. I chose not to because pressing it open twice did the job just fine. But I find when you have trickier curves like this, pressing your stitches before you start pressing your seams open or to the side or whatever direction you're doing that makes it go a little easier. So that's the first thing I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna lay it flat here on the iron. Give that a nice little press. Shift the rest of this onto the ironing table. Give that another press. Oop, y'all can barely see that in the screen. Okay. Okay, so now that that's pressed, I'm going to take this off the ironing board. And I'm going to turn this wrong side out. So I'm just going to reach in right at the inseam, grab the inside layer, and pull it out. Pull open, pull open at this. So now it kind of starts to look more like a pair of shorts. So now that I've got this open, I'm gonna stuff the end of the ironing board into this space right here to make this first set of ironing a little easier. So to bring it on pretty much as far as it'll go before it gets really wonky down here. Again, make sure my fabric is nice and flat. Oop, I need to trim my threads. Okay, make sure this is all nice and flat so I don't accidentally press a crease in it, and I'm going to push this open. And right here is where the crotch seam starts to curve a lot, so I'm only going to press to about there. Right along the bottom there. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, so I only really want to press it this much. This seam down here, when you wash it, the pressing that you've done is going to come undone. We're not stitching these seam allowances down, so we really only need to press from here to here. So, correction, we won't be using the tailor's ham, but if we were, we would just put it underneath and you can press right on top of it. So I'll show you a little bit of this pressing technique if you were to go down this far, but you just want to press until you get to just below that notch or so when it starts to curve. So this lets us press curves and have the fabric, ow, that really spit. Have the fabric lay flat around a curve. But we don't really need that for this project. We really just need from here to here, pressed open. So now I'm gonna rotate this around the ironing board to get to the other seam. See, and there's my triple notch, so I wanna press a couple blocks down past that point. Press the seam open up until the point where it starts to curve on you and doesn't wanna lay flat. So again, we're gonna press from the right side and the wrong side. So I've gotta take this off the iron, turn these shorts right side out so that I can press from the right side as well. Ooh, whoo, I managed to get some pattern matching here. Right here, right on the edge of this line, that is the seam there. Look at there. I love it when unintentional pattern matching happens. Okay, so I'm gonna do the same thing. Make sure my seam is nice and flat. Press it from the right side. Smooth out those seam allowances so they're nice and flat. And again, just rotate this around to get to the other seam. Woohoo! Nice, more pattern matching. It's a little bit more obvious here because there's a curve happening at this point, but it's still nicely pattern matched. All right. Okay, so now we're ready for our next step.